everyone. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have yet another podcaster. It's great. I love speaking to podcasters, learning from each other, and following the journey. Julie's here with us today, and we're going to talk about a podcast, maybe a little bit about podcasting with your partner, because I do that with my wife as well, which is fun. Julie, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It is a pleasure to be on your show today.
Come on. As co-host, we're going to do this together. I love this.
Let's
do this right off the bat. Let's talk about your podcast and give people a little insight behind the scenes.
Well, I have to tell you, I described my podcast the other day to somebody as my child with my husband. It's our own little child. We put it together. We brought it to light together. And it really is something that we continue to nurture and grow and really invest into creating just a wonderful show so that individuals who are looking for the inspiration, motivation to be more confident in their life and business, they can find these incredible interviews and hopefully the tidbits that they can add to their toolbox when it comes to being confident and going after your dreams successfully.
Great. Tell us the name of your show and how you landed on the name of your podcast.
Well, this is a fun little story. The name of our show is Casa De Confidence, of Home of Confidence. And the reason we came up with the show is when I launched my business, I use my favorite quote, which is my life's mantra. The quote is by Henry David Thoreau: "Go confidently in the direction of your dreams, live the life you have imagined." And I started Go Confidently Services, which is the name of the business. Now, when I started a podcast, I had no intention of doing it for business or to help my business or grow my audience that could be clients. I started a podcast because I was turning 50, right, when I was laid off and I started my business. And I was in the process of planning a big birthday party for myself. I was laid off right at the beginning of the pandemic. I was offered a separation package. And I thought, this lockdown thing we're inside is going to maybe be a couple weeks. But in April, I am going to have my big milestone birthday party. But my husband saw differently. He saw that this was not going to be something that lasted very long. And he found himself with an extrovert wife who had just lost her job and now was starting to build something new. So he decided to, not only was I going to build my business, but he decided to distract me. I've been wanting to start a podcast for a long time. And he ordered the podcasting equipment as a birthday gift. And he said, "I ordered podcasting equipment. You're starting a podcast." And my response is, "Are you crazy? What am I going to talk about? I don't even know." He's like, "Well, you've been talking about it for a long time. You've been wanting to do this. So no better time like the present." And I said, "Well, I don't know if I can do that because I wouldn't even know how to edit a show. And what do I need to do?" And he said, "Okay." He's like, "I'll make you a deal. You are the talent and I am the tech. So you record." And he had done sound in college. He works for aerospace. He's very tech savvy. So he was going to do the editing. So that's how we came about to having this partnership. But then it came about that we needed to come up with a name. And I thought of calling it, I don't even know what I thought of calling it. Like I was just stumped for a name. I was sitting in the dining room because that's where I started to work on my business. I wasn't working in the office at the time. And we have a sign in the dining room that I bought right when we got married. Now, my last name is DeLucca. My husband's name is Collins. And when people started to visit us that first year that we were married, they would say, because I never changed my name, I just added his, they would say, "We're going to Casa De Collins." And Casa De Collins. And I looked at it and I said, "You know what? The podcast is going to be called Casa De Confidence." Because I want people to know that this is the home where you come to feel at ease, to feel accepted, to be yourself, but to also hear the stories of other individuals going confidently in the direction of their dreams. So that's how the name came about.
Beautiful. For a first-time listener to your show, where should they start? Most recent episode, any episode in
Hmm.
particular?
You know what? Funny you should say that. You and I were just talking about this today. A good way to start, if you don't want to go all the way to the very beginning, because we've have over 188 episodes now,
Awesome.
you can start in today's episode. So this is August 1st, and we dropped an episode that we didn't really plan out. It was outside of our production schedule, but Sunday, my husband said, "Hey, I want to ask you a few questions." And I said, "Okay." And he interviewed me. And yeah, we released this episode. So this will give you a glimpse into a little bit of who I am, what I do,
Nice.
what we do with the show, why we do the show. And it could give you a catch you up, sort of like one of those recap episodes that they show at the beginning of a new over a show returning after second season. Now, mind you, we have not been on hiatus at all, but this gives people a glimpse into our world. But if you
Nice.
want to check out the beginning, you also can. It's interesting. I still listen to the first episodes because I want to go back and sort of reminisce. And by the way, we've had 3 different microphones since we started, and I guess my ear is beginning to be trained because I can also hear a tinge of difference between the sound from the very beginning to now.
Great. For the people listening in, thinking about starting a show, they don't have the tech skills to do this. They might not know somebody who's tech savvy. Any tips on starting your show and getting past that hump of technology?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people really are intimidated by the technology. And if you don't know somebody and you're not in a position to be able to hire somebody, the first thing that I'm going to say is my mentor is Pat Flynn. And if anybody, I don't know if anybody knows Pat Flynn, but
Yeah.
I actually almost wore, he just sent me a t-shirt for being one of the founding members of his community. And I was going to wear it today and I decided against it. But he started podcasting. He has a course on podcasting. He has some videos on podcasting. My husband, again, has been watching him for as long as I've been watching him. He's been watching the tech videos that he does, and I've been watching the business videos that he does. But he has some really great content as to what do you need? What kind of microphone? You need a dynamic, a condenser. He also talks a little bit about what are ways you can use GarageBand from your iPhone to do some of the editing and then uploading it to one of the RSS feeds. You can also use Audacity, which is a free software. And there's a lot of different things that are available to you right now. The other thing, too, that if you wanted to start a podcast, that's another way of doing it. And I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, David, but YouTube just released podcasting in YouTube. So you can upload a video and release it as a podcast in the podcast category of YouTube as well. So there's a lot of different ways to get started. And I will tell you that perfection is the enemy of done, and don't
Mm.
wait to be perfect. Just go out and be great and take a stab at it. And you will see how easy it is to build momentum as long as you take that first step.
I think that first step's the hardest, I think, for a lot of people. And
Mhm.
as you get past that hurdle, I think the momentum starts to pick up. You start to see some numbers come back of people who are actually
Yeah.
listening and where they're listening. I always find that to be probably the most encouraging statistic to look at is where people are listening from. And there's countries I've never heard of. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that is such a great feeling to know that our voices are going out and having an impact in places we've never been.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing I remember when I started to measure all the different places that the podcast is actually being heard, I thought, wow, there's something that I'm going to say that someone that lives a complete different world away, life, culture, is going to hear, and I'm hoping that creates a ripple effect for them. So that it's a very fun way of sharing a little bit of you with a lot of other people out there.
One thing we chatted about before we hit record was the whole idea about intentionality as we
Yeah,
approach our podcast. And I know
yeah,
that's
for
something really
sure.
important for you. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit and what that means to you?
Sure. Intentionality, that's a big word for
It
me
is.
today. Intentionality for me has been something that has allowed me to create consistency in my life.
Okay.
And many times we look at ourselves and we think, I'm going to be motivated. I'm going to go do the thing, right? But we don't have an intention. We don't know what the end result is. We just want to do something. When we don't know what our intention is, we don't know the aspiration, we don't have a why behind our actions,
Mm.
then it is very difficult to create that consistency that we talked about.
Right.
So, one of the biggest things for me is that my consistency comes from number one, knowing what the aspiration is for the future. For me, I feel very strongly that I want to create a message, that I want to make an impact in the world, help others, leave a legacy. And for me, knowing that that is my end goal, then that drives my daily action. It drives my priorities. It creates a plan of direction, sort of that GPS. A
Mm.
lot of times people know that they want to go to a restaurant, but they don't know what restaurant, where, what type of food. And it's difficult to, if you typed into your GPS restaurant, you're not sure what you're going to get.
Right.
Whereas if you say, I want to go to a Japanese restaurant in the other side of town, take me the fastest way, then the GPS can start to map that. And that's the same thing for your life. Creating intentionality is knowing what destination to put into the GPS.
That's a great analogy, a great way to picture that. I love it. I can see it. But yeah, we get so caught up in maybe some of the big ideas of our podcast, but we don't narrow it
Mhm.
down to the point where we know who we're talking to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. We hear people say you can be like a mile wide and an inch deep, or you can be a mile deep and an inch wide. You really need to
Mhm.
kind of focus in on what's important to you as a podcast host.
Absolutely.
What are you learning about yourself as you grow your
Mm.
podcast after 180 plus episodes? What are you learning about yourself in the process?
Well, I think Hmm. New lessons, I don't think I can necessarily pinpoint one, but I will tell you one of the lessons that I keep reiterating is that I'm a people person. I'm a connector. I'm someone that loves to talk to different people from different walks of life with different stories and really taking a deep dive into who they are and what their aspiration or their intentionality or their the way in which they're showing up into the world. It's one of my biggest things that I keep reiterating. I've always been social, as I mentioned before, but the podcast is teaching me that our world is made up of so many different interesting people that we cheat ourselves of learning. We cheat ourselves of the incredible relationships if we're not open to learning, to forging relationships, to understanding people. And by the way, when we get to know people better, the world becomes sort of the smaller family as opposed to the scary place that sometimes people want to say it is.
I love it. Who beyond Pat Flynn, which I'm a huge fan of, he's an amazing creator and
Mhm.
he does truly care about his community. Who else has kind of been there for you as a podcaster in the early days to kind of help you shape your show?
In the early days, really, I would say Pat has been one of the most influential people. The other person that I really have to say I learned a lot from. I have a friend, her name is Corinne Crabtree. She's got a top rated podcast. She's been in the top 10 health and wellness shows. It's the No BS Weight Loss Podcast with Corinne Crabtree. We've been friends since 2009, and I have seen her journey. Corinne started her podcast, but she was very clear that she had one message. She's teaching women how to lose weight and feel amazing doing it.
Hmm.
She's never, made any changes from that original mission of what she wanted to share. And knowing that if you're very clear on who your podcast is for, if you're very clear on the message that you want to bring to that person and don't deviate from that, everything else kind of falls into place if you have those things. And that's the same thing for me. Seeing her success, seeing that consistency. And by the way, the format of the show, her show has tweaked and changed and evolved a little bit, but ultimately her message remains the same. The people, the person, the woman who is the person that she hopes will listen and be touched and learn something or motivated from what she's listening to hasn't changed. So the same thing for me. I've been really inspired by that, by knowing that again, I like to say, and I did switch a little bit early on in the first couple months of the podcast releasing. I originally wanted to create this space where women came and listened to other women. But within, I would say, yeah, 2 months into the show, I realized that, wait a minute, my husband is sort of my co host now by default. But there's a lot of other cool dudes out there that are doing some incredible work. And we can be inspired by them. So I bring in some of the cool dudes as well. And I haven't deviated from bringing incredible people who are aligned with my purpose to share their stories or share their zone of genius.
How did it feel for you to figure out who your audience was and who your audience wasn't? Was that a hard thing to kind of sit down and map out from your perspective?
I think that for me, I pictured myself.
Okay.
I pictured my friends. I picture the person that I wanted to become and the types of things that I would have to listen to in order to get closer to that picture. So I've always been very conscious of that from the very beginning. I think that in some circles, you call that defining your customer avatar. But
Right.
again, for me, it was never defining an avatar for customers, right? And by the way, yes, people find me through the podcast. It helps to nurture my audience, people who eventually hire me and work with me. But ultimately, really my goal was picturing that person. And I really based it on me maybe 2 years ago when I didn't know some of this stuff, or I wasn't introduced to so many different new things that I'm learning and that I've learned through the individual guests that have been part of the show. And that's how I define that.
Because I know, like, one of my shows, I have 7 podcasts that I do. One of them is called Dad Space. It's a podcast designed for men as
Mhm.
partners, as fathers, as community members, and how to be good to yourself as a husband, as a man, as a father.
So good.
And so I focus in on my avatar, my listener. It's a father. He's got kids. He could be adopted children. He could be a foster dad, but he's got kids in the home and he's just figuring out how to be a good dad. So
Mhm.
that's my target. And I guess when we're first creating our shows, we want our podcast to be for everyone. But
Yeah.
if we talk to everyone, we don't really get deep with the people that we really would love to target and speak to. So I'm focused and targeted on dads. But the
Mm.
joy that I find when I look at my analytics is the majority of my listenership are female. And
Wow.
that makes me so happy because I'm speaking to who I am picturing as the ideal listener to my show, but someone else is finding value in the
Mhm.
content beyond who I'm focused on. Doesn't mean I'm going to change my focus. I'm going to continue to speak to dads, but
Right.
I welcome everyone. So
Mm.
when we narrow down our audience, it's not really a point of saying who's not allowed to be in part of this or who's not
Mhm.
welcome. That's not what we're saying. It's more about I want to speak to this group, but if you come and listen to my show and you find value, everyone's welcome.
Yeah.
So I think people get a little nervous that they're afraid to get too focused, too niche, too niche
Oh,
because they're afraid they're going to alienate someone.
absolutely. And I will tell you that, my woman is a woman who perhaps was in corporate America and has big dreams, and it's pivoting from a corporate America career or maybe staying at home to launching their own business. But I do have a lot of women and some cool dudes who listen that are not or are not entrepreneurs, have no intention of becoming entrepreneurs, but they find what I share very valuable. And they love to hear these stories and conversations because they always find some nuggets that they can apply into their life.
Right. And that's a good experience. What about engagement with your audience? What kind of things have you tried? What kind of things work for you and in growing your audience and keeping them engaged? What are you doing?
Mm. So I am a big proponent of asking questions.
Good.
So, from time to time, we've always, well, since the very beginning, we've always said, "Hey, does this resonate with you? Let us know." And we launched what we in the very beginning called the Casa Insider. But
Mm.
then I didn't really like that name. Somebody else came up with that. The producer, hashtag handsome hot husband, co-host of the show. And I said, I'm not calling it that. I don't like that because that doesn't resonate with me. I am sure it's not going to resonate with my listeners and with the listeners for the show. So we definitely have continued to engage and we give opportunity. We ask people to follow us, to subscribe to the show, but also we have a call to action in the show. Go and visit the website, sign up so we can keep you abreast of new happenings. And we've grown our email list. Growing your email list is very important if you want to keep in touch with your ideal listeners, with the people who are your audience, and again, resonating with them. I am lucky enough too that I have a lot of local audiences that I meet from time to time, people
Good.
that have been very religious about listening,
Nice.
and they give me feedback. They said, "Hey, I love that interview." I invite people also to my Facebook groups. They can come in, and as they come in, I continue to, like I said before, ask questions. Another way in which we keep in touch with our listeners, of course, is social media. And social media, a lot of people have this love-hate relationship with it. I happen to love it, but you have to use it strategically. You cannot just go in and post your latest announcement that you have a new episode and hope that that's how you connect with your listeners. No, you go in, and if people are following you, you give feedback. You comment on them. You kind of create these conversations. I read all of the reviews too for our show.
Good.
Every time we have new reviews, we bring them up on the air and give shout outs to people because people love to hear their name. That's another way in which we engage. And lately, David, I will tell you a couple things that we've been doing. On Sundays, if you've listened to a regular episode of our show, I typically do an interview and that's pre-recorded, but Sunday is our production day. So at Casa De Collins, we get up, have coffee, and then come to the office and my husband and I record the intro to the show for the week. And it's a little banter conversation between the two of us.
Mhm.
And we sit here and he's doing his production stuff, editing, or he's mostly edit, but he's recording us and editing that, and then stitching it to the other recording. And in the very beginning, when we were doing that, we were doing quick stories for social media. Now I've decided to go live on Facebook every Sunday as we're
Wow.
recording.
Wow.
So it's been a really fun thing to do because really the release day for the show is Mondays, but we typically release it early on Sundays. So if you're in Facebook land on a Sunday, you'll watch us go live. We don't have a specific time for going live, but it's always
Yeah,
fun to see our listeners kind of tune in and kind of see how the magic is done behind the scenes.
that is a super smart idea. A great way to build engagement with your audience. And I
Absolutely.
think people love the behind the scenes stuff.
Hmm.
You watch how a TV show was made or how this was made. That's pretty captivating to get a sneak peek, especially for those
Yeah,
that are curious about podcasting, maybe. They're like, I have
absolutely.
no idea how this happens. And seeing it through your eyes, they're like,
Hmm.
okay, I think I can do this. So
Yeah.
that's great.
And it was funny a couple of weeks ago, not this past two episodes, but probably episode 187, 86. You can go in there and we logged into Facebook and we have a theme song. We have a theme song that I love. And as we were recording, my husband starts to play the intro and then he comes in and introduces the name of the guest. And then we jump into our conversation prior to the interview. But as we were listening to the intro, I start talking over the intro and I'm like, wait a minute, people on Facebook, can they hear the intro? So I'm speaking and we have a conversation right over the entire intro. And he's like, of course they can hear it. I'm like, are you sure? We're on Zoom, we're on Facebook. How does that work? He's like, trust me, they can hear it. We're connected from the soundboard. I'm like, I don't understand, right? So you can hear that whole little exchange on the actual podcast. And when so then as we were on Facebook and we did that little introduction, he says to me, "Hold on, I need to go look at it. I need to go here and see what happened if it captured you." So of course, it captures our whole conversation. And he's like, "Okay, we need to do this over and delete it and start again." I said, "No, leave it. Leave it for the people who are listening so they can see the listeners who are not on Facebook can also hear this part of the conversation and see the behind
See,
the scenes."
behind the scenes access. I love it.
Mhm.
That's a great idea. Again, because people have this impression that as podcasters, they hear the finished product. It sounds crisp and clean and well
Mhm.
edited and perfectly balanced and everything's awesome. Where you were like, if you had any idea what is on the cutting room floor of all the things we've had to fix or change or,
Mm.
you'd probably get a different picture of what
Yeah.
podcasting is all about.
And by the way, there's been some instances in which we haven't had a perfect recording. And yes, my husband he's a perfectionist, trust me, when it comes to sound. Um, but I've pulled up rank. He might be the producer, but I guess I'm the executive producer because I will say no.
Mm,
We need to release it like that. I will give you an instance. I interviewed this woman who was a fascinating interview. It was phenomenal, and we were co-hosting an event together, and the conversation that we had was just incredible. She went through so much with her daughter who had cancer as a young girl, and it was just compelling
mm,
conversation.
right.
And the sad part about it, David, is that my friend, the person I was interviewing, did not have headphones on. So my sound was coming through her speakers.
Right. Yeah.
And I happen to have a very sensitive microphone. So
Mm,
as I responded to her, my microphone was also picking me up speaking. So when the recording was done, and I could hear something, but I couldn't put my finger on it, but I thought it was fine. When my husband went to hear it, it sounded like there was a possession in the background, some sort of ghost kind of,
yeah.
yeah, it was bad. And I will say to Dan's credit, he cleaned up a lot of the sound. It was not perfect. It was probably a B minus. He probably would give it a C. I think it's a B minus.
Mm, good.
But we released it and he was not happy with it. But I knew that there was no other chance to record some of the stuff we talked about. There was no way to recreate that. And I wanted people to get the essence of the conversation. So that's how it was left.
It's interesting because my wife and I do podcasts together as well. And we had done something the day before with our mics. I had unplugged my mic and plugged hers in, which is on a different stand 5 feet away from me. And I did my next interview the following day, not with the mic I had in front of me, which I thought was plugged in, which wasn't. I was using the mic, which was 5 feet away, and it was picking my voice up way over there. And when
Mm,
I finally heard the recording, I'm like, oh no, like it sounds like I'm in another room. And it was the heart sinking feeling of, do I have to go back to my guests and try to get them back? Do I try to recreate this? How do I
yeah.
fix this? So you just kind of learn as you go and
Hmm.
you never do that mistake again, but
No.
there's always a way to fix it. So
Yeah,
we do our
absolutely.
best, right?
We do our best. And again, I think that for many of us, really the goal is to remind ourselves that when we have listeners that are devoted and really love us and our content,
Right.
they may put up with a little imperfection. But if we are launching something brand new and nobody knows us, we want to try to get something out there that people will like and
Right.
build that like, know, and trust.
Good. One thing we talked about before we hit record is you have a checklist available for people. And I'm quite curious as to
Ooh.
what's on this checklist. We'll have links in the show notes to come and grab a copy and interact with you around the contents of this checklist. What do you have for us? What's this great gift you can impart on us as listeners?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things that when we have, because now we have other podcasters that we help with getting their show up and running. And one of the first things that we realize is that my husband calls them the P's, the P's of podcasting. And that's prep. plan, produce, post, publish, and promote, and then process the results, right? And this is a testament to his little Sig Sigma mind that he has. But we walk you through in this checklist, what do you need to do to prep, right? Define your goals, like we've talked about. Maybe your 1-year vision. Define your target audience. Choose a launch date. Then we move into planning. You want to plan and choose the format of your podcast. Is it going to be an interview? Is it educational? Is it like a true crime drama type of thing?
Right.
Do you have a name? Do you have a tagline? Define the overarching theme for your show. Then you want to go ahead and decide, are you going to be podcasting on seasons? Maybe a short period of time. Maybe you're doing episode length for an hour, half an hour, 20 minutes. Will you have segments within your podcast? Again, planning all of these important details that you need to have in place as you begin to produce a podcast.
Right.
We talk about, you're choosing your host. And obviously, we recommend Buzzsprout, which is what we use, but there's other hosts out there, and there's great plans, and they can get you started for free also. So
Right.
there's all of that. And then what kind of microphone will you have? Depending on your computer, will you use something high end, something low end? What will give you great bang for your buck, depending on what your budget is. So keeping all of these things in one place so that you have something that can guide you as you move along. So this is the Go Confidently checklist. And it's available on my website. And actually it's goconfidentlycoaching.com/quick links, and people can pick it up there, but I'll send you the link as well so you can put it in the show notes.
Excellent. Talk about your coaching program. What do you do and who do you help?
Oh, all
Come
right.
on.
Coaching program. I'm a business and life strategy coach. I'm also an author and speaker, and I speak a lot about tiny habits, productivity. I am a big proponent that habits are the thing that create the traction in our life, that create that consistency. Our brains want to be very consistent. Our brains are already automated half the stuff that we do throughout the day. So if you want to grow the business, anybody as a coach can teach you, this is what you need to do for your business. This is your marketing. This is how you create social media posts. This is maybe how you create your offers, how to sell. But ultimately, as the business owner, and I mostly work with women and again, some cool dudes, my goal is to help them not only create that right strategy, but create the plan for implementing that strategy. I also use the framework as a tiny habits coach to help them create the habits that they need in order to show up for their life, to show up for their business. People can work with me either a one-to-one or they can be a part of my group coaching program. I also offer masterminds for people who maybe have worked with a coach or have a coach, but are looking for accountability and a community that can help them feel like they have people in their corner cheering them on, walking in this journey, because being an entrepreneur can be very isolating. So I wanted to create connection, collaboration, and help to inspire each other to go after our goals. And ultimately, for the individuals who I work with, I want them to stop riding that roller coaster of feast and famine that many entrepreneurs see with their business.
Right.
I ran multi-million-dollar businesses before quite successfully. I've scaled my business in 3 years to create consistent income, replace my corporate salary. So now I want to help others create their dream and create that consistent income so that they don't feel like they're working 24/7 without getting the payoff of covering their bills. They can actually pay their bills, but they could also have fun, be with their families, travel, whatever it is that they want, creating that life blend that makes sense for them.
What are some tiny habits that we can implement for our podcast this week? Any suggestions for us?
For people who are just starting out, one of the biggest things that I would say is you want to start small.
Okay.
Maybe you want to go ahead and write out what is it that you want people to learn about your podcast, or take a piece of paper and for a week, write down all the things that ideas and just brainstorm. Whose podcast do you like? Why do you like that podcast? Right? How long are their episodes? And brainstorm all of that. When you come to your desk in the morning, right? This is the framework of a tiny habits. You need to have when you and do an existing behavior, you will do your new tiny habit, and C, you will celebrate. So whatever it is that you're doing when you come to your desk, open up your piece of paper where you're going to write all of this. Number 2, when you have your piece of paper open, you will write maybe 5, 10 things that you know about other people's podcasts or things that you maybe have in mind about your podcast that is nowhere out there that only you can provide. And C, celebrate that you're putting together. And at the end of the week, if you're writing a couple things here and there, you will have a comprehensive brain dump that you can start to then organize and synthesize into the plan for your podcast. And you can use our launch checklist to kind of figure out where that would all go.
There you go. I love it. And the other thing too, I would say as well is at the very beginning, we define our why. We know who our audience is, but I would also encourage people to define what does good look like to you as a kind of a measuring stick, like good as far as the artwork for your show. What do you think good looks like? What's your definition of good? What is your definition? You mentioned of the length of an episode. What does good look like to you? What is something that it's going to help you define for yourself kind of the direction for your show and what you want it to become? Define that to answer that question. What does good look like to you as a podcaster?
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent question, David. I think that what does good look like to you? And by the way, when you ask yourself the right question, your brain will go to work and will start to come up with the right answer.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear you say. That we put that in front of us. Right?
I love this.
I love this. This is great. This is great. I hope that we have more than one conversation, to be quite honest, because I just love listening to having you on the show and hearing more about your podcast. Any tips before we go about podcasting with your partner, with your spouse? Because I think maybe there's people listening going, it sounds like you and your husband have things figured out, and that's exciting. And I love listening to the two of you podcasting together, the banter, the kind of back and forth between the two of you. You both have amazing voices on the show as well,
thank you.
which I have to say. But what's an advantage about podcasting with your partner?
One of the advantages is that you can wear your pajamas to work and they don't care.
Yes.
But on a serious note, one of the advantages too is that, for Dan, he knows me the best as my partner, in life, my partner in business. And he can really take the opportunity to have candid conversations with me. And we'll say, hey, maybe I noticed that in that episode you were umming a lot or you were whatever a lot, right? Or I can say to him, I think that, you're being too hard on yourself. And we know each other's strengths, we know each other's weaknesses, and we also work to not only combine our best gifts, but complement each other where we need to. And that's one of the advantages and things that can happen when you're working with your partner.
So pass along to Dan my greetings and my thanks for his input in your show as well. And I know you're doing it together, but sometimes we don't think to, as listeners, we don't think to thank our hosts for the podcast they put out on a regular basis. So as a listener to your show, I just want to say thank you for creating such great content. Thank you for showing up for us as your audience. And I just want to encourage the two of you to keep going, keep moving forward, because you're filling a need and you're building community. And as part of your listening community, I just want to say thank you for creating your podcast. And I just want to encourage you to keep going.
Well, thank you so much, David. It's so kind. I love encouraging words from another podcaster that is high caliber individual putting amazing content out there. And if you're listening to this, you got to know that David is the real deal. And we want to make sure that we tune in to all the amazing things that he is sharing with us, because he's bringing you a lot of value in his show. So thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing. And that value comes as well from our amazing co-hosts that come on the show and share their wisdom and knowledge, taking a moment out of their day and their podcast to share their expertise with us as we're listening. So that would be you. And I thank you for being part of this as well.
Well, thank you so much. And David, you're amazing. Don't forget, go confidently in the direction of your dreams.
Conflict. And again, where do we find you? Where's the podcast? What do we do? Where do we go?
Well, the best way to find me is go confidentlycoaching.com. If you want to get the checklist, is goconfidently.com/quick links. And if you go to the website, you can find the podcast. I am also Julie DeLucca-Collins and all of the platforms. And you can find my website and my podcast through all of my social media.
Amazing. This, folks, is what a pro sounds like. And I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, Julie. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here. I appreciate you.